Today, I'm welcoming back someone many of you loved in episode 31, Dr. Shane Combs. Shane holds a degree in advertising, an MBA, and a PhD in education. His career path is incredible. He's worked with Activision Video Games, the University of Florida Athletics Marketing Department, Clear Channel, today known as iHeart. And he also built and ran his own regional ad agency for a decade. And now he spent nearly 10 years at the University of South Florida. At USF, Shane is he was an hour ago, the Assistant Director of Academic Programs. And Shane, you just mentioned you got a promotion. What's your
Yeah,
new
so
title now?
I am now associate director of academic programs as I'm now overseeing multiple campuses.
Awesome. That's amazing. Congratulations. Well
Thank you.
deserved. And he also leads the exploratory curriculum program, guiding brand new college students through their very first semester and helping them find direction and confidence in a world that's changing super fast. Shane brings a rare combination of academic insight, business experience, and real world perspective. And I'm so excited to have him back. Welcome back, Shane.
Thank you so much for having me.
So in our last conversation, Shane, you said something that shocked a lot of listeners, and I got a lot of requests for the part two of the continuation. You said that we need to be putting young people in leadership positions, not someday, not after they've proven themselves for 10 years, now. And that statement became the cliffhanger that we left you off with at episode 31, because business owners everywhere, myself included, are watching this new generation enter the workforce, and we're trying to figure out how exactly do we put someone in leadership when they're anxious or overwhelmed, they're values driven. They seem to have a completely different set of driving forces and rules. And since you are at the forefront, at the leading front, helping them transition from high school to, college to the real world, I would love to pick up exactly where we left off.
Fantastic. So let's jump right in. One thing I want to do, if you don't mind,
Mhm.
before we kind of get into, what kind of leadership is this generation craving? What kind of structures are important for entrepreneurs to instill in their businesses right now? I want to set some parameters and a framework.
Okay.
And this is really important. This is something we do a lot in academia, that you do a lot in very high end business people. When we think about the most successful business people that we read about all the time, they do this. But I find it's not something that is naturally done by the, entrepreneurial population naturally, right?
Yeah.
It's something that you kind of have to be trained to do. So we're talking about, how do we relate to a whole new generation? We're talking about concepts like divergent thinking, right? These concepts are so broad that I find a lot of entrepreneurs get overwhelmed, don't know where to start, and therefore just either ignore or never capitalize on the situation.
Mhm.
So I consider myself the guide for your listeners, and we're here to ensure that they take that right first step, right? And the first step is going to be setting these parameters and these frameworks for this pretty broad conversation.
So like a modern playbook on how to manage and lead these younger generation employees.
Exactly. So to start our playbook, one thing that I did is I gathered information, right? So yeah, we are going to lean on historical concepts and data that we know do cross generations. But what your audience is looking for is, we need that new data, that things that are coming out, very quickly about this generation, right? And that's what happens anytime there's a shift in generational workforce. We have to quickly gather some new data to help us make some decisions, right? So when I say data, in academia, we normally use what are called scholarly sources. Well, what does that mean? Because I'm sure you all hear that term a lot. What that means is that they are peer reviewed. What peer reviewed means is, I'm not just making some claim. I'm having other respected members of our industry double check my work, right? So I'm in the USF Moonwood College of Business, and I want to release a new strategy for leading Gen Z. And I've done a few studies, and I've looked at my students. And that took me about 6 months to a year, because I got to make sure I was right, right? I notice something, then I really study it, I replicate it, and that took a year. Then I send it to a journal. Well, those journals only exist if what they publish is accurate, right? So these journals have a very high monetary drive to make sure what they publish is accurate. So then they have their own people look at my study and confirm, yes, what Shane is saying about Gen Z workers is correct. Then it gets released to the general public and anyone can critique it, right? So that process takes about 2 to 5 years. Right now, we love scholarly articles because we know that they're true and that they're accurate and that they're can be replicated, right? That's kind of the point of taking a scientific approach to even a social science like business. However, not many of your listeners can probably afford to wait 2, 3, 5 years in order to start making changes. A lot of us won't be in business if something doesn't change soon, right? So, the kind of articles that I'm going to be citing today are going to be what we call best practice, right? So, I want you to imagine that at the birth of Netflix, Amazon, or Uber, one of these, foundationally changing corporations that have come around in the last 20 years, that CEO is blogging every single day about what they're doing, right? Or imagine if we could go back in time and Henry Ford or Thomas Edison could go on X and just drop in the chat something that they did that day, right? So the positive about these is that they are going to be coming right from expertise, right from the source, right? So that is why I chose the collection of articles we are going to discuss today, because they were all released within the last 2 years, the majority of them in the last year, right? So this is forefront, newly off the presses data about how to deal with Gen Z workforce.
Perfect.
Um, yeah,
Well, thank you for that.
yeah,
You are one of the most over prepared in a very good way. I mean, which
yeah,
doesn't surprise me coming from you, guests that I've ever had. So
yeah.
I really appreciate all the time that you've taken to gather this and share this with us today.
Yeah. And so just wanted to point out you have all the articles. You're going to release them so that your audience can review them. It's so important. I'm here to prime the audience, but I need all of you to still go read these articles for yourself. Right?
Yes.
This is about starting your journey, but at some point you're going to have to do the work yourself, right? So
Yes.
we've
And just real quick,
yeah,
I'm going to place them in the show notes if you guys are listening on your favorite podcast listening platform. For the YouTube, it'll be on the YouTube video description links. And then also on our website, createbrandnv.com. That's create brand and then the letter nv.com. And under this show page, I'll also have those links for you as well.
yes, and the audience is going to see things like Forbes, McKinsey, HR Digest, Harvard Business Review. And there's one or two scholarly articles, but again, these are still well-respected sources in the business community.
Perfect.
So,
Let's get into it.
yes, so what am I here to claim today to your audience? I'm here to claim that young professionals naturally bring divergent thinking. They challenge norms, they offer fresh perspectives, and they innovate without being bound by tradition or past failures. However, one more piece of parameter we have to set: what is divergent thinking, right? Because again, I started those saying I could ask 100 CEOs and get 100 different answers.
Right.
I could ask
I
100
mean,
Gen Z employees and they could give me 100 different answers about what they want.
yeah.
That overwhelms the average entrepreneur, and therefore they don't know how to take a step into such an infinite universe. So, here is how I would like to define divergent thinking. So, when we move through the rest of this recording, your audience at least knows how we are defining that for their own use, right? So,
Perfect.
I kind of hinted at it a minute ago. I want us to think about Netflix, Amazon, and Uber. Those are the three exemplars of the last 20 years. Not only are they billion, trillion-dollar companies, but more importantly, they have changed the fabric of society, right? The way we consume content. Netflix put Blockbuster out of business, right? The way we shop, the way we transport, all these things have been fundamentally changed by these companies. So, when we think about Uber, for example, right? They reimagined how people could access transportation. So, what was the divergent thought in Uber? The divergent thought for Uber that the average entrepreneur just cannot see is they imagined, what if anyone with a car could be my employee? I hear all the time how employers are having trouble getting an applicant pool. Well, have you ever thought about how you increase the scope of who a possible applicant could be? Because Uber goes, there's 242 million people with a driver's license in America. Any one of those 242 million people can be my employee,
Yeah.
right?
I can imagine them saying, like, why would anybody use their personal car to drive strangers around? And who would
Yeah,
get into some person's personal car to be given
yeah,
a ride that's so unsafe? So
yeah.
immediately there's a ton of pushback coming,
Mhm.
right, when the idea first originated.
Yeah. I can remember when Amazon and others like it were first coming out in the mid 2000s, and my mother goes, no woman will ever shop online. We need to touch the clothing, we need to feel the shopping, right? Now, she never goes shopping in person, and malls are essentially, ghost town, right? She had that same fear, but Amazon was right. Their divergent thought about how people get goods, fundamentally changed. But again, going back to Uber, right? They also saw the smartphone not as a phone, but a logistics hub, right? They also, and this is actually my favorite part of Uber, Uber did not go build a fleet because rich people do not spend their own money, right? That's how they get and stay rich. What Uber did is they built a platform that allowed them to unlock scalability across the world without a heavy monetary investment from their founders and their board, right? And their stockholders.
Yep.
So that's what we're talking about when we talk about divergent thinking. Now, let's translate this into what we're really here to talk about today, right? That Gen Z professionals are going to bring that to your business. They have the ability to generate creative, nonlinear solutions. They're going to challenge norms, bring fresh ideas, collaborate across disciplines. That's a really important part because a lot of us older folks, we are stuck in our silos, and they are naturally going to go, I don't care about that silo from 20, 30 years ago. I think it's perfectly normal for me to go across the hall and collaborate with someone in accounting, someone in a different department, right? And of course, they're going to use technology in a way that we don't to solve problems. However, it's not an easy process to get this out of them, right? We know that our current structures and our leadership philosophies are not really designed yet for this generation. So essentially, I want your audience to think of them as like an untapped resource. You have this mine full of gold, this mine full of coal for fuel, right? We have this resource. We just have to learn how to mine it correctly because that's where that the dissonance is coming. Our older leaders who are 30, 40, 50, 60, we don't seem quite yet to know how to get focus these people to get the maximum value out of them while dealing with the fact that yes, they're going to have unique issues that previous generations didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into the good stuff, right? What is the research indicating about hiring and managing this new generation? So we have a Forbes article from just a few months ago that says 88% of Gen Z says purpose is the top key to their job satisfaction. It also says 54% consider meaningful work a top criterion when evaluating their employer. And so this article says employers should clearly connect roles to broader societal impact. Okay. And in a minute, we're going to talk about a really good exemplar from this. It's actually from civil service, which is very interesting. It's a government agency called the Energy Conservation Corps. Okay, well, guess what? Great for you that it's really easy to draw a line between being in an environmental agency and broader societal impact. How is someone who owns a plumbing or AC repair company, how is someone that owns a car dealership? How are they going to do these things, right?
Yeah.
And so this is where we come in. This is how we're going to reframe as the current leaders to the generation below us. So if you asked me this 10 or 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't be able to answer it. But it took me a millisecond to know how to do this, right? So let's use plumbing and AC repair, what we consider blue collar jobs, what we know are severely understaffed right now, and what I tell my students all the time are ready to pay young people probably more than you would make in a white collar job right out of college, right? So let me ask you, Nicole, have you ever had an important event at your house? A Thanksgiving holiday, a children's birthday,
Yeah,
anniversary of your wedding,
sure.
and you're about to have a big party, and suddenly the plumbing is stuck. The
Mm-hmm.
AC has gone out. And that plumber comes out and they fix it for you. That
Yeah.
AC person comes out and repairs it for you. And I bring this up because it actually happened to me about a month ago. And I was telling that person, thank you. You have just made a meaningful difference in my day. I was about to have to cancel an important thing I was doing at my house for people that I love. But
Mm-hmm.
because of you, because of your prompt response and great service, that a meaningful life event can continue,
Yes.
right? So that's an example of how we take a blue collar job and reframe it for this next generation. Same thing with cars. And let's actually use used cars as an example, because when I was growing up, we always heard the old brand image of a used car salesperson, right?
Right.
Well, let me ask you this. How important is your vehicle to your life? Does it not get you to your job? Does it not get your children to school? Does it not connect you with the rest of the world? Right? So even an affordable used car that is reliable has a lot of impact to an individual person. And
Right.
that is how I would, if I was a manager of a blue collar job, whether I was leading during the job or even probably more importantly, during the hiring, recruiting process, posting on Indeed and LinkedIn. These are
Mm-hmm.
how I would frame these understaffed blue collar jobs to Gen Z by connecting their desire to see the purpose of their work.
Right. Okay. So connect work to purpose and make sure that you're championing that constantly to this generation so that they can have that thing that they need, which is to feel that whatever work they're doing, it's and I'm kind of like I'm holding myself. I'm like, what about the money? What about the money? Like, do you have any comments on that? Because purpose is good, but sometimes there's like when it comes to you know do you know what I mean? Like, is there any
Yeah.
kind of like, because I've even had I have clients where and it's a little bit off subject, but not really.
Yeah.
I have some clients where me as a marketer, I'm helping them bracket their brand into purpose because I
Mm
understand the importance of that, especially if you're trying to appeal to this younger generation, right?
hmm. Mm
And then
hmm.
sometimes they give me a pushback saying, in real life, like when I'm talking to clients, like, the purpose is a nice to have, but what really seals the deal, what people really seem to care about is, well, how much money are we talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so, any
That
thoughts on
is,
that?
yes, great question. Guess what? We've been talking that question for 100 years. That's not a new question.
Sure.
Yes, all people need a job that pays them enough to be able to afford their bills. And if you're lucky, live a better life than the one you started with, right?
Yeah.
That's a baseline function of work. And I'm not
Right.
arguing that's not important. But
Right.
what we're talking about is everything else, right? Again, we've all always had to make decisions on, oh, I like this job better for purpose, but this other one pays me more.
Right.
So what
Right.
I wanted to do is not worry. We're not here to talk about pay versus pay. We're here to
Hmm.
talk about how do we attract them and how do we manage them, regardless of pay,
Okay.
right? So,
Hmm.
um, just like I said, yes, we will. Eventually, every person has to make these decisions. But now we're going, what if the pay are equal? How am I going to decide as a
Differentiate.
Gen Z employee which one I'm going to go to? Or
Hmm.
once they're currently with me and we've already established what their pay is, how
Sure.
do I, continue to manage them?
Hmm.
Right. So that would be my answer to that is yes, money will always be a deciding factor, but it's not really going to help your listener create a structure to better support these new generation of workers.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I might circle back to that later.
Yep, cool. Awesome. So let's go to another source that we have here. And this is on one that we know we talked about it last recording. You were giving the example of how many Gen Z employees seem to take a day off for mental health reasons that are,
Right. Because their
you
pet
know,
rat died.
because their pet rat died, right? Perfect example. Well, this source says 91% of Gen Z employees report experiencing stress, and 98 feel burnt out at times. Now, again, these aren't necessarily earth-shattering concepts. I think we all feel this way. They did say, though, 61% would leave a job for better mental health benefits, right? So now we're thinking about a classic entrepreneur concept, the insurance you provide your employees, or not, right? But again, we're seeing a shift. Maybe 20 years ago, it would have been just health insurance, maybe family health, because now we're talking about how Gen Z is not making a family as early. So maybe that family health plan is less attractive to this person. And they would go, if I could make my health plan, I prefer that I get, free mental health counseling over, dental, over right? Care service, right? So what does this article recommend that your listeners think about doing? They want you to offer wellness programs, psychological safety, and empathetic leadership, right? So this particular article from the Interview Guys in 2025, those are things that we are thinking about that maybe you didn't have to think about in previous generations. I think it's so important that we realize we have the same conversation every 10 or 20 years. Our parents complained about millennials. The baby boomers complained about Gen Xers.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not new. Yes, the individual data points are changing. What is important in each iteration is changing. But conceptually, this is a part of entrepreneurship for the last 100 years. You have to stay in touch with what
Right.
your clients, your customers, and your employees want out of
Yes.
their life. And so again, I'm just going to ask that your audience take a step back about what they feel about mental health and access to it, and just consider installing either an interest in an insurance policies that cover mental health, or enacting options at your work that allow for a little bit more appreciation for mental health days. Because at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, all we're talking about is burnout. And we've all been there. You've had a long day, it's 3 p.m., you have one more task to do, and your brain just can't seem to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we just want to keep our employees refreshed. And for this generation, it's just looking a little different. Maybe 20 years ago, we would have taken a smoke break. Well, we know smoking is just down overall. I mean, think about when we first worked together at iHeart, how many people would take those smoke breaks every
Mm-hmm.
hour, right? Well, this generation doesn't want a smoke break. They want 15 minutes of a meditation room. They
Mm-hmm.
want you to bring puppies to work so they can pet these puppies. I know a lot of
Did
employees.
did you know? You're
What?
being very kind. I'm admitting I used to be a smoker.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you're very kind to not say it.
yeah.
But I used to be a smoker, and yes, I used to take smoke breaks. But did you know that Bill Ames and I used to leave to go pet puppies in the middle of the
Yeah,
workday?
right. So perfect. This is my point.
Literally, like go to a
Sometimes,
pet store and just
yeah,
pet puppies because we
yeah,
were both so stressed out, and
yes,
it helped us like recenter and
yes.
recalibrate.
And that's what's so important as you and I, as these buffer generations, right? So we represent both the end of one generation and the beginning of another, right? So you and I have this responsibility to help others be kind of this bridge. Because I didn't even know that about you. But
What?
guess what? That you were going to pet puppies.
Oh, yes.
So, right,
Totally.
this is not a new concept. And I get very frustrated when it just seems like a lot of people frame this new generation as somehow
Right.
remarkably different or odd. They're just doing things slightly different. Like I said, instead of a smoke break, they want to have you convert one of your empty rooms into a meditation room and have healthy snacks. It just
Mm-hmm.
looks different, right? That's all we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Should we keep moving?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool. So we have another article from HR Digest, And this one is focusing on Gen Z's interest in work life balance and flexibility. So, this article says that 77% of Gen Z workers are prioritizing work life balance over traditional career climate. They also say Gen Z prefers outcome based work over rigid schedules. And I want us to keep this in mind because we're going to get to this in about 5 or 10 minutes. We're going to start talking about specific examples of what this is looking like. So, my recommendation, where possible, definitely consider remote and hybrid options. Again, we actually have seen a huge pushback at very top level corporates calling for a return to work. I'm not disagreeing with it. But what I am saying is, in 10 or 20 years, these folks will be wrong, right? So, what I'm trying to encourage your audience is instead of always being behind the curve, let's get ahead of the curve. Because I promise you, remote and hybrid work is just going to expand. And it actually is helpful to you. Again, we all are keeping in mind that a janitor can't be remote, right? But for most of your listening audience, we are in white collar work where some folks on their staff have the ability to be remote, right? Your IT person, your marketing person, your accountant. And by being remote, you can now increase your scope of applicants, right? We started this whole thing with Uber going, we think any person with a driver's license could be one of our employees. I want you to do the same thing. I want you to remove the restrictions of physical space and learn how to remote work and hybrid work because it's only going to increase. You might as well get on that train now. So again, we will come back to all these concepts. We're just starting by, giving your audience the primer and the facts.
Um,
So
I
the
would
last,
even
oh, go ahead, please.
no, I would even add, like, when you say that, all you said, like, make your accountant remote, blah blah blah. I mean, when you say that, it makes me think of, and I'm not one to predict the future, but I feel like I kind of am, that if I'm sending if I'm in charge of this large corporation and I say, you know what, accountant, you can work remotely, um I would basically, I would, I could, especially if the focus is based on outcomes, right? Like, because you just
Mhm.
said the work performance, make it based on outcomes or results, not so much actually physically being there or how much
Yep.
time it's taking.
Yep.
It immediately makes me think of a freelancer setup where basically I could even convert my accountant or any other position that really doesn't have to be full time in the
Yeah.
office, and
Yeah.
then just switch them over to a contractor role. So maybe in the future we would see
Yeah.
companies that have fewer employees and more hybrid remote workers that are free to freelance for other companies as well. As long as they're meeting the work obligation, who cares?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, that concept's a little scary, a little bit of a slippery slope to me,
So was
because
Uber and Netflix when they first came out.
what I meant by my concern about your statement, and we're going to actually talk about this,
Mhm.
is you have to be mindful as a business owner, right? We have a bottom line. Sometimes things need to be cut and trimmed to stay in business, right? Let alone turn that profit that we're hoping to do. What scares me about your statement, though, is if it's not done right, you run the risk of devaluing the employment to a point where you're saying, I don't think you're, worth being a full time employee. We've
Mhm.
seen a lot of cases where people have attempted to turn a full time position into more of a freelance, a contractor,
Mhm.
and again, in certain situations, it can work out, but in a lot of situations, it's really not advisable.
Hmm.
But what you did stumble upon, if you were open to it, is one of my show prep notes that is here talking about the effect of the 2007 to 2014 recession and how it's influencing this Gen Z population, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Let's hear it.
that is actually where the rise in freelance and what we call second jobs have become a really important aspect of the American workforce, right? I think you were really getting at is we may not have a future where work looks like it did for our parents, where you have one job, 9 to 5, Monday through
Yeah.
Friday, and you die at the job you got out of college.
Yeah.
What was once taboo has become norm, which is that maybe I don't have one 50-hour work job or 50 hours a week work job. I have two that are split in half. But by doing that, I've increased my flexibility. I'm getting passion from multiple avenues. I
Yeah.
get, I get those things you're looking for. So we know that from the 2007 recession, that there was over a 5-year period a loss of 8.8 million jobs, right? The deepest decline in employment since World War II. And what this did is it disrupted long-standing employment patterns,
Mm-hmm.
especially for mid-wage jobs. And
Yeah.
so what the research is saying from this, and this is, I'm talking more historically, is by 2012, we made up 60% of jobs lost in that time frame. So yeah, we did recover, but you have this large, percentage of the population that really never recovered. And what they turn to is the rise of temporary and contract work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this just added to one of the things we're about to talk about, which is the, eroding of the traditional career path, right?
Yeah.
So, um, the article that we were just talking about, the one from HR Digest, where we're talking about work-life balance and flexibility, also had a statement and some data about career development and advancement, right? So 70% expect a promotion within 18 months. We're going to put a pin in that and come back in about 30 seconds. But that,
Yeah.
right, that I think that is what scares a lot of employers right now, hearing a crazy stat like that, where our generation was raised, nose to the grindstone, maybe a promotion in 5 or 10 years.
What is that? What's that saying? It was pay your dues.
Yeah, right. Right. And they're not saying that they're afraid to pay their dues. So what this article then did, though, is, and I love this article, is it really took that concept of expected promotion in 18 months and broke down what the Gen Z employees really meant by that, right? Because it doesn't necessarily mean I expected to be a director of this company in 18 months. What it does mean is they are looking for role diversification quickly. They are looking for mentorship. They are looking for cross-functional training. They are looking for skill development. And they are looking over all that over actually traditional hierarchy advancement, right? So when they say expect a promotion with 18 months, they're actually talking about a lot about lateral growth.
What
And
is?
that,
Can
yeah,
you give an example? Because
yeah,
and then you said like compared to tradition to hierarchy, what you just said, the
hierarchy, yeah, yeah, yeah.
hierarchy,
Yeah,
and like that also could use a little bit more clarification.
yeah. So when they say they expect a promotion within 18 months, again, they do not mean they expect to be assistant director in 18 months,
Uh-huh.
right? When they really qualitatively interviewed these folks, what they really meant was lateral growth. And that was actually kind of interesting, kind of a big no-no for about 10 or 20 years, right in our kind of, generation, where we were kind of taught like, it's actually almost insulting to give somebody more responsibility without a promotion, right?
Mhm.
And again, I'm not saying these things in a blatant statement.
What do you mean by, sorry, what do you mean by lateral move? Like
Yeah, so yeah,
versus,
yeah. So instead of me getting a raise in money and a raise in title, I want to make sure that I have a dedicated mentor. All those things, that those examples I gave, those are examples of lateral growth. Mentorship, skill building, role diversification, cross-functional training, right? So I not only want to get training on the job you have me doing, I would love to train or shadow someone in a different department, someone in a higher role. And again, what's really funny to me is these are things that actually happened pretty naturally in business in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. But we were in a time when everyone was making so much money and there was so much goodness to go around that the employers felt they had plenty of resources and time to provide these things. over the last 20 or 30 years, we have seen on-job training, on-job mentorship, on-job, um, you know, um, what am I trying to say here? Developing a skill beyond the role. That
Mhm.
has gone away because employers are now at their bottom line every day. They're barely
Mhm.
surviving. So they go, no, I can't hire this college person and give them a year to turn me a profit. I'm expecting this college to make this person ready to make me money the moment I hire them,
Yeah.
regardless of the fact that they're 21 and have never worked in the industry. That's been the
Yeah.
shift that is really plaguing this generation.
Yeah, and I think that has to do with globalization. The internet has really opened up
Mm,
has made the ocean a lot larger, you know. It used international business used to be like, like this big
yeah.
thing, and now it's like everything has changed, and you're right, everything's a lot tighter now. Anyways, I won't go off on a
Yeah.
tangent. All right.
So let's finalize this part of the topic. Ready? So we've talked about purpose driven work, mental health and well being, work life balance, career development and advancement, right? We've set up 3 or 4 of these big concepts that this Gen Z workforce is looking for. Now let's look at some people that these articles are saying are doing this well.
Mhm.
And this is so important because one of the reasons I want to have the conversation with you today is I often feel like entrepreneurs believe this task is impossible. And that's a really important mindset because these exemplars, not easy to do what they're doing, but the fact that they're doing it means that it can be done. And
Right.
if it can be done, anyone listening to this can do it if you can scale it down or customize it to your particular barrier or issue, right? So let's look at this from a few different industries. So let's look at government work. Let's look at civil work. And I teased this earlier. There's a company called the Energy Conservation Corp, right? Which has a clear link to societal impact. Now, we kind of poked fun of it earlier because, yeah, that's an easy one. And I really hope your audience listens to how I told you to frame it if you're in a blue collar job. But what the other things that they are doing is a structured learning. So they will actually give their employees an hour or two in a day or week to train on a skill for their job, right? And they are actually paying people like me. There's actually a really high paying position in education called learning design, right? And they pay, these employers come to us and go, hey, you're educators, you're teachers. We need to train our employees. Can you make us these modules, right? There's a lot of people who do learning design consulting who can just make so much money going to these different employers and going, I'm going to make you the modules and the content for your training,
Right.
right? Another one that this article pointed out from the retail space, that's really important, is REI, Recreational Equipment Inc. We actually have one of those in Midtown
Yeah.
over on Dale Mabry, right?
Mhm.
So, what are they doing for Gen Z? They are offering paid days off if you volunteer, if you're doing volunteer work in your community, right? So instead of having to, use an annual
Wait.
leave,
Are the paid days off for volunteer work, or
yes.
do you get time or in your free time, if you're volunteering, you get paid days off?
No, in this particular example, it is you can get a paid day off. It's a Monday, it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, paid day off if you are volunteering. Now, it's not infinite. It's probably like 2 or 3 days a year, right? But this is just an example of going, we know how much making a difference in your community matters to Gen Z. Here
Mhm.
is a paid day off to go do that. You
Yeah.
no longer have to do it just on Saturday or Sundays on your day off.
Yes.
So, and this is where we get to the real more into hiring practice. We haven't done this much yet. They do blind resume screening, right? So somebody, before they were removing or reviewing the resume by a human, somebody was removing their name, removing like gender, race, ethnicity. They're removing all the demographic and identifiable components and having you just read the content of the resume. Don't even know that person's name, right? They are doing, they also have what they call inclusion networks. And we're going to actually see this in a lot of people. It's just a big word for mentorship, right? But essentially, REI has these networking events and networking groups specifically for women, veterans, and other populations, right? So this is REI going, we really value you. We know it's tough as a veteran. Oh, the data on how difficult it is for veterans to return from combat and get employment is always been very shocking and upsetting to me, right? But this is a company going, hey, we understand that it's different for you as a veteran. So we are going to make a group for you all to interact with each other and support each other within our corporate structure, right? So one more example again from these articles of a person who is doing, this kind of things very well from the hospitality and travel industry. We have
Mm-hmm.
Marriott International, and they have ERGs or employee resource groups, which is the exact same thing as the inclusive network from REI. You can see we just give these things different words, but they have these internal support groups for people who are 35 years old or younger, and they call it Generation Go, right? So this is a large company investing in creating a structure for young folks, in their
To
employment.
connect.
Yeah. They also have the Marriott Development Academy. And this is where any employee can go to get upskilling for hourly non management employees, right? So I am a front desk worker at a Marriott. I work in the kitchen, I work in cleaning the rooms, and they will for free give me training in areas like finance, HR, IT, loss prevention, and sales so that I can go from someone who is a maid to
Right.
someone who is a sales executive, someone
Right.
who works in HR, right?
They're providing
And
that upward mobility opportunity so that there's no barrier. They're removing
yeah,
barriers.
yeah. And last one from Marriott, they have cross generational mentorship programs. So they are purposely pairing those two groups that seem to be at odds with each other and helping them get to understand each other a little bit better.
That's amazing. Those are great examples.
Yeah.
Um, uh, One of the other points that you had mentioned was redesign entry level roles for the AI era. I think I remember reading a few articles, cautionary articles, just kind of saying, companies are no longer hiring, entry level positions because some of the stuff can be easily replaced by AI. It's
Yeah.
cheaper. They don't call in sick, whatever, but it's creating a big gap, a problem.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and so again, your audience can go read this. This particular article is from just 3 months ago from the Harvard Business Review. And if you don't mind, just because it's important, I'm actually going to read directly from
Yeah.
the sheet,
Yeah.
right? So this Harvard Business Review is saying AI may automate tasks, but it cannot replace human growth, creativity, or leadership. Entry level jobs are not just task based, but they're development for your future. If you cut too many entry level jobs, you will lose your leadership pipeline,
100%.
right? It's also going to say that AI, while it can automate routine tasks, which I'm actually a huge fan of AI,
Me
USF
too.
is
Who
a
isn't?
co-pilot organization, and it does so many things for me that makes my life much easier. But
Yeah.
what AI cannot do is it cannot replicate judgment, creativity, collaboration, and resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see what they say about this concept. So this study analyzed 62 million workers across 285,000 different organizations, right? And I think it's really important for your audience to hear that, yeah, even though this may not be scholarly, I think that is a pretty robust sample size for them to
Yeah.
be able to make these kind of claims, right? So here's what they observed over 2023 to early 2025. Entry level employment dropped 8% at AI adopting firms. Industries like retail saw entry level hiring fall by 40% per quarter compared to the non AI firms. And finally, senior employment rose. So what this article is starting off with is we are widening the opportunity gap if you do not set up your AI, you know, future correctly. So, what does this article say all of your listeners can start doing? And what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, is kind of put this in the framework of either working at iHeart or Spotify. So, you
Hmm.
and I worked at iHeart. It's a digital streaming organization. About 10, 15 years later, I think Spotify may be what Gen Z is probably using more than iHeart. I use iHeart every day. But I know, for instance, my brother and his wife, who are 5, 10 years younger than me, they use Spotify. But either way, it's the same concept, right? You are producing audio content to be streamed in the car, office, or at work. So this article says one, automate routines, but not development. So, yes, we can use AI to handle repetitive, low value tasks like data entry, scheduling, and reporting. With that, though, you don't want it to just do those things and be done. You got to remember, if you are freeing up time, the entrepreneur in your audience needs to know, what do I do with this new time that's going to increase my value and my revenue, right? So this should free up more time for high level judgment based opportunities, creativity, and collaboration, right? So remember how we talked about that these young people expect some sort of promotion within 18 months. And we were just like blown away by that timeline. But if they are not wasting time doing low level tasks that really do not improve them as a worker, maybe
Yes.
they can actually get that raise quicker,
Yeah.
right? That's the
You know,
concept we're moving here with.
yeah, I earlier I was talking about my use of AI at work, and I gave this weird analogy that kind of comes back to mind, that without AI, I feel like my company would still be crawling like on
Yeah.
elbows, right? Like
Yeah.
on our forearm, like just kind of crawling through the dirt. And I feel like AI helps me like stand up
Yeah.
because I'm not bogged down by stuff that would just take me hours and hours. And it really does always need human supervision. I've had some clients be like, oh, with AI, you can just go boop, 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 bah, and it spits it out. And I'm like, yeah, of course we do that. And then I spend a good 30 minutes, sometimes maybe 45 minutes, bracketing into where I need it to be because I'm using my judgment. I'm
Yes.
using my creativity. I'm
Yes.
using my contextual knowledge. Like I'm
Yes.
using all of my human power, and this thing is just helping me from not getting stuck on a sentence.
Yes.
Sometimes you're like trying to get a thought and it's not coming out right, and then you're like, oh my god, the sentence doesn't even sound right. And then now I can just be like, help me make this sound better, and boom, and I'm
Yeah.
like, yes, that's exactly what or that's right, but just this little adjustment, and then I can like grab it and move on. So
Yeah.
we can work quicker with AI. So arguably, these younger people coming in using AI and maximizing their time and being able to have quicker advancement
Yeah. Right?
because AI is actually helping them, not the curve is not so slow, it's
Yes.
now quicker.
Right? That is the concept, right? So let's imagine I'm a Gen Z employee. I'm working at iHeart. I'm working at Spotify, doing, ad sales, right? That's where we all start in this line of work. So now AI is doing all the scheduling, all those follow up meetings. Do you remember how long it used to take us to make a really good PowerPoint presentation? 2, 3, 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
If that
And
can be
then they
done in
hired
10 minutes,
like a sales assistant to help us, but then
yeah,
she was bogged down by 10 reps making different requests. So I never
yeah,
really even used her. But I remember I used to say, can you imagine if I didn't get bogged down with all the administrative client
yes,
maintenance stuff, can you imagine like what a beast I could be, how much ground I could cover in forming new relationships, negotiating new deals, blah, blah, blah,
yep.
blah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's literally what the article goes on to say is now that they are not doing that low level stuff, imagine the relationship they can build with their client. Like really spending time with
Uh-huh.
them, really getting to know them, even when you have a large client list, right? Um, it'll also allow them to maybe do deeper analysis. Since I don't have to spend 4 hours on the PowerPoint, I can now use that time to go even further in my research for this, client that I'm working on.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So
Actually, I
automate. Yeah.
And even for me, for preparing for meetings and stuff, before, back in our day, 20 years, 15, 20 years ago, I would always research a company before I would go meet with them and try to sell them, ads. So I'd do a
Yeah.
Google search and read what I could and, click here, click there, try not to, go down a rabbit hole. But now I can do my prep with ChatGPT
Hmm.
and just ask very direct questions and it like crawls the internet and cites the sources. And if I read something that I'm like not sure of, I can click and look at the
Yeah.
source or independently research it. Again, it just accelerates
Yes.
everything for us.
And so, just I want to take a quick side journey. With AI, you are doing a great job expressing how it should be used, because a lot of people, like I said, are just doing the first prompt and copying and pasting what they think is right. Right? You're going, well, sometimes I can tell what's wrong, and I need to guide it. Right? So, but even at that point, it will take you 10 minutes instead of an hour to do something.
Yeah.
And
And I've
so,
actually said there's another episode that I did solo where I was saying do not use AI for something that you don't know about. Because the problem is that, like, so if I know a subject really well and I'm using AI,
mhm,
right? I'm an expert. I'm using AI to help me do my job quicker. That
yep,
works. But if I'm using AI for legal advice or something that,
mhm,
is outside of my field, the problem is you don't know what you don't know. And
exactly.
and AI is not intelligent by any means. There's no
Yes.
intelligence there.
Yeah.
And I won't go down the rabbit hole of explaining it, but it's really just kind of like a word soup.
Yeah. Well, so I actually just got back from a conference in Vegas and we're talking about this a lot. So current generation of AI suffers from what they call AI hallucinations.
Hmm.
And what the listener needs to understand about AI is it's like you said, it is driven by parameters that we give it. And one of
Hmm.
the parameters that's at the core of all the AIs that are out there right now, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, is to ensure that the person asking the question gets an answer. Right? All these companies releasing the AI, they can't have their product going, oh, I'm not sure. The people aren't going to use it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they've given it a core directive
Yeah.
to always answer your question,
Yeah.
whether or not that answer is correct.
Yeah. There's this great podcast that was shared to me and I'll have to look it up. But it was basically it was from a very reputable source. I think it was from like NPR or something like that, where this reporter was interviewing this person that and the guy wasn't like the brightest tool in the shed, but basically he started having these like grand ideas about like physics and something that was pretty complex. And then the chat GPT, he was kind of like asking it questions and saying, what about this idea? Is this even possible? And chat GPT, as we all know, is like so good at complimenting you and making you feel like a genie. Like that's a brilliant observation. And so long story short, this guy ended up truly believing that he had come up with this because he
Mm.
didn't recognize or realize, he thought that, AI was like, this master of all the knowledge of the universe and that it was correct and that he had cracked some kind of weird code. And ChatGPT was like, yes, it's possible. Yes.
Yeah.
So anyways,
Cool.
I digress.
Yeah, no problem. So let's get back to it, right? So I have just a few more points to drive home from this article from the Harvard Business Review talking about how to use AI to reimagine the entry level job. And the entry level job is important because that's where these Gen Z folks are starting. So we started with automate low level tasks, but not development opportunities. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
by removing these low level tasks, we should be able to progress them quicker. Better training, more advanced training, more mentorship, more time for whatever it is to progress. Number two, the article says embed learning and mentorship into your job design. So they mentioned things like, make sure the role has structure feedback, pol- peer collaboration, and even coaching from your manager. Again, now, both employee and manager should have 1 extra hour in their day due to AI taking some tasks for them. Use that hour to sit down with your new employee and coach them through something, right? And maybe it's a skill specific to the job. But for Gen Z coming right out of college, maybe it's that time to talk about time management, organization, all those things that we now possess. But let's not forget, that how when we were 21 to 25 years old, how we had to learn these things, the hard way,
Yeah.
right?
You're kind of reminding me of when computers were rolled out, it was like, oh, I don't know, I feel like you're saying now that AI is here, you're expected to do more, have more time, like
Ooh.
produce more. And I'm listening to you and I'm like almost feeling stressed and burned out, right?
Mm.
Just like you're describing this generation to be,
Yeah.
because it's not like if we kind of go back, a bunch of years, zoom back out like 100 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Um Work was a lot more chill
Yeah.
because we were all in our bubble, right? Like there was no computers. Everything had to be done manually. You had to fill out forms. Sure,
Yeah.
it took you all day, but whatever. And then, technology started rolling out and it was like, well, now you can do this faster and you have more you're expected to
Ooh.
do more, be more. And then we got our
Yeah.
phones with the little ding, 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 and the notifications and the this and the that and it's everything's just a lot. And you just made the point like, oh, well, that manager now has to use AI to make their job quicker, better. And now they have an extra hour in the day to sit down and mentor this entry level person. I'm listening. I'm like, oh my God, it's just so much like what it's so much is expected of us all the time.
You nailed it. I love this concept because you have an entrepreneur listening right here, right now. They're feeling stressed about the things that I'm saying. You have the same choice that we've all had since the beginning: evolve or perish, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is so yes, but what the good part is, your listeners are not alone, right? They don't have to go about all this by themselves. They have you and I talking about it, and hopefully they will then go to these different sources. And maybe now, once a week, they will go and read, continue reading articles from these sources. All the sources we're going to post, you can set a little alert and you can get emails once a week with, new
For that
new
topic.
data to read, right? But
Or
yeah, that
maybe or maybe they'll employ divergent thinking to
yeah,
try to come up with a better way of living and
yes,
provide everybody better life work balance. Maybe
yes,
that's the big challenge to solve, for entrepreneurs in this time period in the
yes,
world, to figure out how do we completely dismantle the old work model and how do we
yeah,
completely reassemble it in a way that leverages technology,
yeah,
leverages AI to give people their time back
yeah,
and be able to, have work that's result based, but also money's not an issue. How do you,
yeah,
it's a puzzle.
yeah.
I think
And
entrepreneurs love puzzles.
yes, right. And so we're here just helping them put that together. And that puzzle will end up looking different from every person in your audience, right? So again, I know the things that we are promoting today are not easy, they're scary. But again, I started this saying this is the beginning of the journey, right? Not the end. And so we just hope that your audience leaves today with even just a few nuggets here and there to get them looking in a quarter of the room that they didn't previously think about, right?
100%.
So going back to this Harvard Business Review article, we were talking about they want you to have structured feedback, peer collaboration, and coaching as part of the design of your roles, right? So, what would this look like for a Gen Z employee? So maybe, and again, we're working at iHeart, we're working at Spotify. Now, since I'm not spending all my time scheduling and sending emails and making PowerPoints, maybe you could assign me a mini project where now I can more deeply analyze a competitor's ad plan. So again, think about when we were at our job and, we're selling people, and I think we were frankly very lucky. Clear Channel IR always had resources. They had
Uh-huh.
these national databases where we could pull a little bit of data about competitors and what was going on in the market. But now
100%.
imagine, instead of just 10 minutes of doing this, I had a full few hours to really do this. Yes, I have my sales goals. Yes, I have to meet those. But if I am displaying that I can meet those and you give me this additional project, right, I can just further my learning of the industry. So, the example when you're working at iHeart or Spotify, giving your Gen Z employees a mini project to complete,
Yeah.
right? That is obviously related to their job, but is just maybe going into a deeper nuance that we would normally have not given them
Right.
unless they were at a higher position, right?
Again, career advancement is quicker.
Yeah. And
Um,
so, oh, God.
No, just with that, I wanted to bring up, we talked earlier about, purpose and whatnot, and I asked you about money. Um, this is a thing that's been going on for a long time, and you could see it TikTokers, promoted on social media. It's like the side by side comparison. If this person stays at their job,
Hmm.
they only get like a 3% raise every year. But then if you job hop every 2 years, you keep
Yep.
getting these, so I talked about, so there's a problem for that business owner. It's like, I bring you in, I mentor you, I coach you, I do all these things, right? Like I bend
Hmm.
over backwards to please you,
Hmm.
but what you're being taught in the world is job hop, and
Hmm.
the market is so competitive. If they move to an industry that just has higher profit margins, period,
Yeah. Yeah.
they can offer more money for the same
Yeah.
position. And now I've suffered through training you, and now I leave you, and
Yeah.
so what would be
Yeah.
your insight for that, for an
Yeah.
owner?
So one of the reasons I love your podcast is based on your, work history, you have a really good way of framing it, the way that I think the average entrepreneur is feeling, right? And so let's put aside hopping to a different industry. What you're talking about is fear. I'm afraid that if I invest in a person, and this, by the way, can be any generation, right? If I invest in a person and they leave me, I will be negative on my ROI, right?
Hmm.
Because I've given them more value than they have given me. And then they go take everything I've learned and they go get a different
And then I
job,
have to
right?
start over with somebody new, and it's just you
Hmm.
never get out of that
Yep.
cycle.
Yep. So, one, fear is never a good framework to make a business decision,
Hmm.
right? So, we got to get over that fear. How are we going to go over that fear? So, you just said it. I feel like I'm in a constant loop. Well, that's why systems and structures are so important for business. Because if the system is in place, you can actually handle turnover better, right? So, um, when there's turnover, what kind of training do you have? What ability do you have to make sure that the knowledge that person is leaving stays with you? So one of the
Hmm.
things we do where I work in my particular team is we have our onboarding document, and
Hmm.
after they've been onboarded, when they're about 4 to 6 weeks in, I have them redo or add one section.
Hmm.
You just went through the training. The last person who did it was 2 years ago. What would you, now that you've been through it and you have a little experience, how
What
would
would
you
you
redo it?
add? And
When
what would
they
you add to it?
leave, right? When you leave, if
Hmm.
it's a, a good relationship, before you leave, I have one last project for you.
Yeah.
How can I capture your specific knowledge for this job before you leave, right? And if you have a good culture, that
Hmm.
person is more than happy to do that. We always think of this leaving like the disgruntled employee, but you and I have left positions where we were happy with who we were leaving and we were happy with where we were going, and
Yeah.
we actually felt an obligation, right? So number one is going to be systems. That's why systems and structures, and that's why reading these articles where they're outlining how these exemplars are doing it is so
Hmm.
important to your audience.
Yeah.
But I think another way to think about this is exactly what we were just talking about with this 18-month promotion. If you do it the old way, you will not get ROI from your employee until about year 2 or 3. It's almost no different than when you start a business, right? We
Hmm.
always know that you lose money the first few years. And if you're lucky, it's that year 2 or 3 or 4 where you turn your first profit, right?
Yeah.
Let's think about that in terms of hiring. So, yes, if you do it the old way, you will probably need 2 or 3 years before you break even, and year 4 or 5 before you are actually gaining value from that employee.
Yeah.
However, if you do it the new way, and you speed up their growth, you are having them do higher level tasks at a sooner point. Higher level tasks generate more value. So I'm going to claim that with the right systems and culture, you can actually get your employee to generate value for you within a year or two. And now you are breaking even much sooner. In fact, if done right, you can actually get more value from that employee in that year or two than you would have done in the old ways, in the old way of doing things.
Yeah. The old way, you hold them back,
Yeah.
you yourself are holding them back from
Yeah.
adding value because
Yes.
you're afraid, you think they need to pay their dues, blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah.
You're
You're
gatekeeping high
mm-hmm.
level tasks because you're
Yeah.
afraid to give it to someone else.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And then I'm going to add to that just a little bit of perspective for the listener.
Yeah.
And we'll wrap up. I think this has been amazing.
Yeah.
I used to the Tampa Improv
Mm.
was my client back in the day, Bob Joyce. And when I started my company, I met with him and I said, can you give me some advice? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm, going off on my own. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's some of your best management advice? And he said to me, I don't know that I have management advice, but I will tell you this, something that's a little bit non-traditional that I discovered.
Yeah.
I don't hire servers because
Mm-hmm.
he's mostly hiring servers. He goes, I never hire servers that are career servers. I always
Mm.
hire transient servers. And I was like, what do you mean? Right? Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? And he said, I make sure that my servers are law degrees, law school students, medical school students. I
Yeah.
make sure that when I get their resume, I make sure that they are studying something for realsies and that they are not going to stay with me. And I was like,
Oh.
why would you do that?
Yes.
Because it goes against everything that that we assume that we want people to stay. And he
Sounds
said,
like
no. And he said, if I hire a what does that tell you about the person when they're a career server? And no, and I'm not pooping on servers because
yeah.
serving is an unbelievably difficult job and some make
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable amounts of money. But
Yeah.
he's saying, he's like, what I find is that the kids that come in that are, these types of students that are studying, that they're only going to be here for a year or two, they're sharp, they're smart. I don't have to explain things to them. Like they get things right away, and I'm prepared for that. I'm prepared for the fact that they're only going to be here for a year, maybe two max, and then they're going to move on. And so
Yeah.
I think it ties into what you said beautifully in terms of like, clearly he's expecting it, he's anticipating, he's embracing it, he's got systems for it. He expects it and he hires with that understanding that you're going to be a competent person. So he probably treats
Yes.
them, they say people rise to the level of your expectation. He probably
Mhm.
treats them like competent, like, dude,
Yeah.
you're a pre-med student. Like,
Yeah.
you're not a moron. Like, this is the end goal. Like, figure it out, right? And I'm sure that they have systems in place.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I thought that kind of related to what you said, but just in a new frame.
Not only did it relate, that was a home run. I mean, that is divergent thinking right there. If he told you that and he told 100 other people in his same industry that, and they go, are you crazy? That is actually what we're looking for
Yeah. He said, I
right
don't
now.
want people to stay with me.
Yeah.
If they're staying, they're losers.
Yeah.
I
And
want
maybe
people
not,
that are transient.
yeah. And maybe not exactly, losers, but his point was there is something about this employee type that brings value faster
Mm-hmm.
than the traditional employee in my industry. And I
Yeah.
don't know how he stumbled across this gem, right? But those are the gems that every entrepreneur is looking for. Those
Right.
are the gems that we're finding in these articles. Because again, your audience will read
Yeah.
10 of these articles. Maybe 80% of it really won't work for them. But if they leave with one or two of these little things that
Yeah.
fundamentally change their hiring and training structure, I am confident that it will, increase the value they're getting from their
Yeah.
Gen Z workforce.
Totally. And I think it's kind of like, I'm thinking like, imagine if you as a company hired a young I'm just going to use his name,
Yeah,
Elon Musk,
yeah,
or a young Steve Jobs, or,
yeah,
what an honor to, even if they're, young and green, what an honor it would have, to have
mhm,
somebody with that kind of brain
yeah,
and potential and divergent thinking to have, even if they were there at your company for 2 years, if a student or an individual is brilliant, right, and
yeah,
they have a great mind and they're whatever, um, it would have been a privilege to have him come through.
yeah,
Maybe that's a different way to think of it, not wanting to have somebody that's going to stay, but just reframing and saying, they're
yeah,
going to be transient, and what an honor it is to have had them come,
yeah,
and always stay on like good terms, you
yeah,
know, with them if you manage them correctly using
yeah.
all these resources that you've shared with us. Gosh, Shane, you're go ahead.
I was going to say, I know I was infamous in the last one, leaving you on a cliffhanger. Could I attempt to do the same?
Sure, go ahead for it.
All right, awesome. So a lot of this has been about divergent thinking. You gave the example of Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. And if we think about others in history, Einstein, Edison, what we now know is all these people are on what modern society is probably calling the spectrum,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So,
They hated
um,
school. They hated
and again,
school or didn't finish school or couldn't do school.
yeah, and that's not really the point. The point is these people are on a spectrum of thinking that the average person is not.
Hmm.
And again, I know. So when we have a term for these types of folks that have some sort of and somewhere on the autism spectrum, another term that we use for that is neurodivergent.
Neurodivergent. Yeah.
And so I have also made lots of claims that another untapped employment pool that is extremely difficult to create a structure for, very few companies have done it yet, but is that untapped resource are people who are neurodivergent.
Yeah.
We have a whole population of them who frankly are almost unemployable in the traditional structure.
Hmm.
But if we redid things, these people have what we call hyperfixation. It
Yeah.
allows them to focus on a particular issue or barrier you're having in your company, and they will not stop until it's solved. They
Hmm.
also have that naturally divergent thinking. It's in the name of their medical category of neurodivergent. So
Yeah.
if you are looking for divergent thinking, there's a whole population of them, but that is a really whole nother conversation on setting up structures for those type of folks.
Yeah. Yeah. You're making me think of a movie, the movie about the housing crash. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
remember the name of it. Do you remember the
yeah,
name of the movie?
yeah. The Big Short.
Maybe The Big Short. I, I
Yeah.
I don't I don't remember him actually like them overtly saying that he was neurodivergent, but I could tell from watching the
Yes.
movie and the way that he
Yes.
was dressing and the way that he was behaving that he
Yes.
was definitely he was not
Yes.
normal, you
Yeah.
know.
Exactly.
Um
So that was Christian Bale playing Michael Burry.
yes. Yes, Bale.
Yes,
Very
and
good.
I agree. If his portrayal of that character is accurate to the person, which I've been told it is, yes, that
Mhm.
person is
Yeah.
neurodivergent. It is not, by the way, almost for your listening audience, almost every outlier in business that you've ever idolized, about 70, 80% of them are on the spectrum
Yeah.
because that's how they got to such grand heights. Yes, they have a
Good.
great work ethic, but they are by nature
Good.
divergent thinkers.
I'm saying good because sometimes I'm like I think there's something wrong with me because sometimes they say like the wrong things or whatever
Yeah.
whatever and it's kind of like this release like no it's okay just go be your crazy little self.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a great thing. I don't know.
Yes, it is.
Um but no that's great. And then so just to close
Yeah.
you know you have a gift in your profession that we don't get to have, which is that you're sitting in front of, these kids that are coming out of high school, coming into college, or that have been in college for a while. What are you seeing? What can you share with us in terms of, their perspective, their hopes, their ambitions, or their fears? What would you like to share with us that we don't get access to like you do?
Yeah. So, and again, that is a difficult question because every student, every person's unique. They're going into hundreds of different industries. So, what I think I'd like to do as a closing statement is maybe just take a step back and again, talking about what we're seeing from data in the last 3 years as this generation of is entering the workforce, right?
Uh-huh.
So, kind of that 3,000 level view of what we're seeing. So, what we're seeing is that Gen Z is not just a generation of employees for you, right? I want your audience to think about them as the foundation for their future success, right? They're going to bring that divergent thinking, that technological fluency, and a deep commitment to purpose driven work. That is actually a really good thing for a applicant pool to have.
And all businesses need to have purpose driven work. If you're a business owner and you're thinking, I don't have any kind of
Yeah.
purpose, call me because
Yeah.
I'm a branding expert and it's my job to get in your business and
Yeah.
tell you what your purpose driven angle is. That was a
Yeah.
selfless promotion.
Yes. Now,
We'll
going
help
a
you
little
find it.
Yeah. Now, just if you don't mind going a little further in this kind of concluding statement, right? These young professionals, they're going to help you challenge outdated systems, propose bold ideas. If you invest in their growth, provide flexibility, and connect their roles to meaningful work, you can kind of unlock this creativity and resilience that you may feel your current business is lacking. We also know that you're going to need to embrace their values like inclusion and continuous learning to help you attract top talent. But more importantly, they're going to help you build an organization that is going to be able to adapt and innovate and lead in this next generation of AI. So my kind of statement to your audience is, it's not whether about you can afford to focus on Gen Z, it's about how long you think you can survive without it.
Right.
Yeah, you can survive the next 5 or 10 years, maybe even 20. You can do it the old ways and you may be fine. But if you desire your legacy to live beyond that time point, you're going to need to adapt, right? And maybe that's, I want to pass my business on to my children. Maybe that's, I just want my legacy to outlast myself, right? If those are your goals, then yes, you need to start adapting. You need to start reading the data coming out about how to attract Gen Z students and how to employ them, because it's really about that time. And so again, I encourage everyone, start the journey today by reading those articles. However, the long-term goal of this conversation is that your audience needs to redesign entry-level roles to prioritize development, embed mentorship into their culture, and give Gen Z the tools to shape that future. The companies that act now are going to redefine the next era of our business.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Good. No,
Yay.
that sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Shane, for all of your insights and everything that you shared with us. I really appreciate your time and all of your research and everything. I'm going to share again. I'm going to share all of the article links that Dr. Shane Combs shared with us in the show notes, as well as on the show webpage on the Create Brand Envy website. Thank you, Shane. It has been such a pleasure to have you today.
As always, I love speaking with you and I appreciate you having me.